Hello and welcome to YHTV's Decoding Nutrition. Thank you so much for joining us for this show. And I'm sure that you will really enjoy a moment. We are going to share with you right now an excerpt from a Magical Medical Tour episode with Tracy Harrison and Dr. Glenn Woolman and myself. And just to give you a little idea of the way that and the information that we will be sharing with you this coming year of 2014.
So, nutrition for specific conditions. The first thing I want to talk about, or I want to get your thoughts on, is there are many people out there that have to prepare for surgery and general anesthesia. Now, sometimes the surgery might be a bone or something else, but many times it has to do where you have to go into the abdomen, like an appendicitis or a gallbladder or a colon problem or things like that. So there are many conditions where people go under anesthesia, and I would like to know your thoughts on how someone should prepare both nutritionally and their gastrointestinal tract for a major surgery.
That's a great question. And certainly something that most people will face at some point in their lives. And it's interesting. It brings to mind for me a good story of a client of mine several months back who confessed that right before her gallbladder surgery, she knew she wasn't going to be able to eat all of her favorite junk food afterwards. So she went on this big binge.
Oh, no.
In the 3 or 4 days right before the surgery. And needless to say, that's not what I would recommend.
Nor I.
I think in general, the most important concept is to remember that surgery is a shock to the body. It's a therapeutic invasion of the body. And you want to go into that from a position of strength, not from weakness. And in that sense, really focusing on, in general, good self-care. I think in particular, the week to 10 days prior to the surgery makes a lot of sense. And for everyone, that means not having a binge then, eating good, whole, natural, nutrient-dense foods so that you're really replete nutritionally. Certainly if it's gastrointestinal surgery in particular, very often people can't eat very well after surgery. So you want to be fortified, if you will, replete with nutrients before you go in. So plenty of fruits and vegetables, good healthy amounts of protein, in particular because the body doesn't store amino acids from proteins. So the couple of days before the surgery, good amounts of protein, whether it's vegetarian, like beans and whole grains and nuts, or animal proteins like chicken and fish, eggs. We want to make sure that we're getting plenty of that, a couple of servings a day at a minimum, the 3 or 4 days before surgery. But I think it's important to avoid what I call insults to the body. And to your point about anesthesia, also insults to the brain. So avoiding stimulants like caffeine or depressants like alcohol. I think this is really important for people to have a good, reliable experience with anesthesia and to avoid getting the nervous system confused going into surgery. But really trying to hone in on, good 3 square meals a day. Cruising into surgery, skipping meals is not a good idea. But really honing in on being nutrient dense and being very well hydrated. Surgery in general is dehydrating to the body. The whole experience of being in a antibacterial environment where there's a lot of heavy air circulation, a lot of cleaners used. You want to be very well hydrated.
Well, that sounds great. I would like to add another part and get your opinion on it. I've had a number of surgeries in my life, and I want to focus a little more on the general anesthesia and the gastrointestinal tract. In my mind, when someone undergoes general anesthesia, there are lots of drugs that are given to a person to take them into a state where they won't have pain and they won't have necessarily memory. And these drugs really work well for that purpose, but they also work on the digestive tract where they stop the motility, the normal peristaltic squeezing movement, which forces food naturally on its path out of the body. And when you go under general anesthesia, and you may end up after surgery on a lot of pain medications, the gastrointestinal tract stops moving. So people can end up getting constipated or have an impaction of stools that are inside the intestine. So one of the things I always recommend to people is within the last maybe 24 to 48 hours, you start going to a more liquid type of diet. I tend to suggest people blend their food, still getting all of the things that you spoke about, but taking it in a blended form so that you don't go into surgery with an entire gut full of food and potential fecal material that may stay there and cause other problems as you go on. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that's good guidance. And in general, for most surgery, but certainly for gastrointestinal surgery, to your point, there's usually a patient protocol around fasting, typically at least 12 hours, sometimes 18, prior to surgery in order to try and address some of what you're talking about. But I think to your point, really avoiding anything that's going to potentially clog you up in terms of being hard to pass. I think in general, it's important to add to your point that no one go into surgery being constipated. We talked in prior shows, I think, about the importance of things like magnesium and adequate fiber in the diet for good motility in the colon. But you don't really want to go into surgery constipated in any way because, to your point, the medications, and as you well said, the vast majority of prescription painkillers are constipating. It's only going to make a bad situation worse. So I think making sure that you've got good motility is excellent. And I'm all for blended foods as long as they still include good fiber-rich foods. People might be hesitant to blend cooked vegetables, right? Pretty much any entree can be put in a blender with a little chicken broth and turned into a soup,
Right.
and be perfectly palatable. So in particular for GI surgery, I think that's a great idea. Great idea.
All right, let's move past the pre-op and the operation, and let's talk about post-op and recovery diets for the first day or two. And let's talk about first, if someone ends up being in the hospital. Let's say someone is on a certain diet that they have normally at home, and that's what they live with. Then they get to a hospital, and the diet, although hospitals try and be somewhat nutritionally current, they're not always at the level that we might be in our own personal use. So what do you suggest for people post-operatively that might be in a hospital getting food that they're not used to?
I think that's an excellent point, Glenn, and I'm chuckling because I really think, as we discussed before, that ideally hospitals, like schools, should really be role models of nutrition in the community, and so often they're not.
True.
My clients are shocked many times to find out what's actually being served to them on the other side of surgery, and I'm a big fan of trying to understand ahead of time. Often you have a chance to speak to either the on-staff nutritionist or someone who's going to be supporting you with meals afterward in order to find out what your options are going to be like. A lot of hospitals these days actually have menus where they'll let you know what might be available to you. But I'm a very big fan of enlisting loved ones to support you with some good nutrient-dense foods. And I was actually going to suggest blended foods in particular for the other side of surgery. Although I think your idea about preparation is excellent. But in particular, nice, good vegetable juices and pureed soups, I think, are an excellent way for people to get nutrient-dense food that really doesn't require a lot of digestion. To your point, motility becomes less of an issue in that case. Just to make sure that people are getting nutrients, whereas often their food is limited even for the first few days after surgery, because surgeons are often looking for some semblance of bowel recovery before they will allow food. So, it can get into maybe a slightly thicker foods, things like hummus or guacamole, I think are nice, soft, easy to digest foods. But nutrient-dense things like green juice or pureed vegetable soup, If it's GI surgery, I might be a little hesitant on raw foods. We're going to get into that, I know, but pureed vegetable soups, I think, are wonderful. You can put lentils or some beans in them to get a little bit of extra protein. But just to make it nice and easy to prepare, to consume, you can drink it, no silverware or tableware needed. Doesn't require a lot of preparation. It doesn't really matter whether it's cold or hot. But I think that can help people to get the nutrients they need to heal when so often what they're getting in a hospital environment is not necessarily nutrient dense, even if it's surgery appropriate.
I remember a story once. I was having a surgery, and before the surgery, the nurse had said to me, and the doctor had said to me, you need to start avoiding some salt in your diet. And after I had the surgery, I came out of anesthesia, and I was back in recovery and back in the room. And before I was leaving the hospital, they wanted to give me a pain pill to take, and they knew I was on an empty stomach. So the nurse gave me, after giving me the pain pill, she gave me a saltine cracker to eat. So I thought it was kind of funny. So sometimes when you brought up the point about talking to the hospital nutritionist, it really is a good idea to do that. I would add one more thing. In the few hours post-operative and right after the anesthesia, I would avoid anything with cream in it. Sometimes that will cause a reaction to bring on a side effect of nausea and possibly even vomiting. So even though sometimes it sounds good, you hear, oh, I just had my tonsils out, I should have some ice cream. That would feel really good on my throat. I would avoid creams for at least the first 12 hours after anesthesia. Do you have any thoughts?
We had a question that came in from Candace. What about when you're sick or unwell? I know a lot of Asian cultures eat simple foods like soups or rice gruel. Does this follow the same principles?
Tracy, I'll let you start with that.
I think it does. I'm a very big believer of soups, especially in some Asian cultures. Miso soup, which is really lovely and nutrient dense. Kind of in some of the classic European or Jewish traditions of chicken broth, that type of thing, very nourishing. I think that's excellent. And again, little digestive effort needed. The body can absorb the nutrients really well. And I think you raise an excellent point, by the way, Glenn, just on dairy foods in general. Even for people who don't have allergies or sensitivities, or even if they're not lactose intolerant. For many people, dairy foods are mucus producing, which generally speaking is not a good idea in a healing environment overall. So I will often recommend, even beyond what you're saying, just getting rid of dairy foods in the couple days build up to, and then maybe even ideally a few days after surgery, just to try and prevent that from being a complication at a time, especially when people's immune systems are maybe more challenged or maybe overwrought. We don't want any kind of impetus for picking up any type of infection. So that's a great point.
Yeah, that is good. I would like to add a little bit to Candace's question. When you talk about foods and illness, especially in the Asian culture stresses to eat local and eat seasonal. And I think that's a very important point for all of us, especially when you're sick. But when you're sick, being sick is a general term. You could be sick with a flu, or you could be sick with a stomach problem. And each one, again, requires maybe specific things. But in all of those cases of being sick, it's probably important to eat less, but eat, as Tracy says, more nutritionally dense. But liquids are probably the best way to go when you're sick. It allows you to still get things in. It keeps you from being dehydrated, and a number of other things. So there's many benefits to that. And I hope we answered that question pretty well. If not, come back with another one for us. Do you have any other questions right now, Christina?
No, not yet.
Okay, we're going to keep moving here because I want to cover a lot of things. But it's so good.
Surprise.
Yes.
Well, you have so much to offer that I want to take every bit of the advantage of that. So let's talk about, just for a few minutes, a few of the different possible post-operative conditions that people might have, realizing, of course, that there are many operative conditions that we could talk about, but many people seem to have their gallbladder out. Some people have a problem with their pancreas. Some people may have problems with ulcers or something inflamed in the gastrointestinal tract. So I know those are a lot of areas, but give us some ideas on how we should eat specifically for a problem after you've had your gallbladder out or something in those areas.
So I think just to summarize and echo what you said earlier, I think anytime that the surgery directly involves the GI tract, I think liquid, pureed, blended, mashed, anything like that that's going to increase our body's ability to digest quickly is a great idea. Not a good time. Many times people have a bias against, oh, it's when I should be eating a lot of raw foods because they're nutrient dense. I disagree totally. I think the cooking of foods in general denatures them and makes them easier to digest, makes the enzymes more effective. So I think post surgery, I'd say at least for the first week, is really when we need to be focused on cooked foods. And liquids softened to whatever extent people find palatable is a great idea. Now, the gallbladder is interesting. I feel like I could write a book entitled, "Oh, I forgot to tell you I don't have a gallbladder," because it's amazing to me how many of my clients have had their gallbladder removed in prior years. And that's we could probably do a whole show on why that's becoming increasingly common.
Mm.
But the gallbladder, as we discussed in the GI tour, is a little sac in the body that holds bile. And bile is produced in the liver, but it's required to emulsify fats. So when people have their gallbladder removed, what they basically have right away is an impaired ability to digest fats. Now, there are
Oof.
plenty of things post recovery that we need to do to support that because fats, as we know, are essential in the diet. We need fats. In particular, there's certain types of omega 3 and omega 6 fats that we have to have that the body cannot do without. But for a time, the body is going to be very sensitive around being able to digest fats. And so, especially for the first few days, I recommend really minimizing fats in food. As nutrient dense as they are, then is not a time to use them. You don't want to be using any fatty cuts of meat. It's not a good time then for whole eggs. And as nice as soft foods are, like maybe avocado or nut butters, it's not a good time for those because they're so fat dense that they're not going to be well digested, going to tend to give a lot of gas, bloating, and loose stools. So low fat, I think, is really the theme of the message around gallbladder surgery. And then after the first several days of healing, then we can start look at supplementing someone with maybe some lipases, special digestive enzymes to digest fat for a period of time. And then also bile salts in order to help the body to have more bile acids during meals so that they can longer term eat more fats because that's really necessary for good, healthy cellular function in the body.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that moment with Tracy Harrison on decoding nutrition. She really attempts to make things so much simpler for us to understand, especially us laymen who have no idea. She keeps right up on what's happening, what's new, what to look out for. And so if you enjoyed this moment, please continue to join us as we continue to release the different episodes up and coming for 2014. Again, if you have any comments or suggestions, you can type it right into the comment box there on the screen. And if you're listening to this on a podcast and you have a question for Tracy Harrison or any of our guest speakers, just give us a call at 818-LETS-TALK. 818-LETS-TALK. And if you would like to hear from an expert or specialist out there, we will definitely try to get in touch with them as well. So be sure also to look for our new slate of shows for 2014. We are beginning to launch them now as we pave the way into the new year. Until next time, I'm Christina Souza Ma, your host of this program and of YHTV. Thank you so much, and namaste. YHTV's Trinity of Life. Come join me, Christina Souza Ma, as I journey to find the many modalities that support individuals, from children to adults to elders, with topics ranging from health and wellness, meditation, and inspirational stories. I invite you to visit yogahub.tv every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern.
Many people that I know that are trying to diet, for example, and that seems to be on the minds of many today, they always feel, oh, if I miss a meal, that's much better because that way I can lose weight.
I am not an advocate of skipping meals because my experience is that it catches up with people. It's the old catch-22 of I'm going to be good during the day. I'm going to have this teeny breakfast and this teeny lunch, and then I'm starving and I'm going to crash and burn late at night and eat a half a gallon of ice cream.